Welcome to the Irish Pagan School podcast. Your hosts are authors and co-founders of the Irish Pagan School here in County Waterford, Ireland, Laura O'Brien and Jon O'Sullivan. Fáilte.
Are there any Irish creatures that can cause you to die of fright? Well, Dagda Eve August Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. This is Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and I am exploring some of the more fascinating and weird elements of Irish mythology, the monsters, the creatures, the beasts. And so I am going through a bit of a list that I've created, trying to find them, and I have found one which I find very, very interesting, and I thought I'd share some information on it with you today. This one is called the Geniti Glinni. Now, it's not a singular, it's actually a collection, and these are known as the specters or spirits, or in some translations, women of the valley. And as the story would go, there is this particular valley in Ireland, and the valley is occupied by these entities. So much so that people steer completely clear of that valley, well knowing it for a dangerous and deadly place to go. The sources where we get this story, it comes from two actually. There's two sources for it. One is Fled Bricriu, which is Bricriu's feast. And in this story, there's a competition between the three great heroes of Ulster, being Conall Cernach, Ler Búideach, and of course Cuchulain. And so at this feast, in order to try and figure out who gets the hero's portion, who's given the rank of true great hero of Ulster, they kind of get into it, and there's a whole lot of back and forward of who deserves what and who's killed so many people and who's raided so many like cattle, etc. But what it really comes down to is pretty much a year-long quest where these three great champions are sent off to do these feats, these kind of terrible, risky, dangerous kind of things to try and see who comes back as the best. Now, in Fled Bricriu, the Feast of Bricriu, we have this challenge of the spirits or specters of the valley and the Geniti Glinni. So the three lads are sent off into this valley. They're specifically told, yeah, okay, go into the valley, and whichever one of you comes out victorious, will pass this test and be our great hero. Of course, Ler Búideach goes into the valley. He rides off into the night, into the darkness. The next morning he comes out and he's found beaten, battered, bruised, and stripped bare. Conall Cernach is then sent in thinking, yep, Grant, I can outdo Ler Búideach, no problem. The next morning, coming from the darkness, he is found beaten, battered, bruised, and stripped bare. And then we have Cuchulain. So Cuchulain rides his chariot into the valley, into this dangerous place. And we have an excerpt. We actually have an excerpt. I have this from Jacqueline Borgia, who did an amazing paper. This is The Terror of the Night and the Morrigan, Shape-Shifting Faces of the Supernatural. So I'd recommend you kind of pick up and read their work. But there's an excerpt specifically of this terror or this fear, this thing that could kill by fright. And so it says, the Geniti screech at him, Cuchulain, as he comes in. They wrestle with each other. His spear is fragmented. His shield is destroyed, and his clothes are torn around him. The Geniti beat and subdue him. So these spectral creatures, this force in the valley, overcome Cuchulain as well. He's beaten, he's bloodied, he is battered. But Cuchulain doesn't ride alone. He's riding with his charioteer, a guy called Luke. And Luke goes out of his way. He then shouts at Cuchulain. Well then, Cuchulain, said Luke, wretched coward, one-eyed sprite, your fury and your valor have gone, since it is specters that ruin you. And so, in the midst of it all, Cuchulain is almost overcome. Lurg gives him shit, sasses him out of it. And if anyone knows anything about Cuchulain, he's not this paragon hero type person. He is pretty much a rage monster. And thereupon, Cuchulain is contorted in a spectral way, and he turns towards the terrors and he hacks and fragments them so that the valley was full of their blood. So this challenge with the Geniti Glinni, the two other lads go in, they absolutely get their asses handed to him. Cuchulain goes in, he initially gets his ass handed to him, but as he is prompted and taunted into a feat of rage, this description of his contortion, this warp spasm that goes on Cuchulain, this hulking out element that we see of this hero, means that he himself is then able to contest with these spectral creatures and tear them apart, so much so that the valley is full of their blood. But does this mean they kill by fear? Well, Cuchulain wasn't afraid. Lair Búideach and Conall Cernach were physically beaten. So they weren't killed by fear. But there's another step in the story about the Geniti Glinni, about these specters and forces that we have to look into. And this comes later on in the Táin Bó Cuailgne. So in the Cattle Raid of Cooley, Cuchulain is then the only last man standing to face the invading army from the four provinces of Ireland. The Ulstermen have fallen to their sick beds because of the justifiable curse of Macha, and Cuchulain, being this demigod, is the only one, the demi-hero. Well, no, that's half a hero. He's kind of a half a hero too, not fully a hero. Different story for a different time. But essentially, yeah, Cuchulain is there to meet this invading army on his own. And so there's a part where he's riding out, he's waiting for he looks out across the fields and he sees the assembled host and he begins to go into a rage over it. And it says here, this is O'Reilly's translation, Cecile O'Reilly's translation from the first recension of Táin Bó Cuailgne. Anger and rage filled him when he saw the host, because of the multitude of his foes and the great number of his enemies. He seized his two spears and his shield and his sword. He shook his shield and brandished his spears and waved his sword, and he uttered a hero's shout deep in his throat. The goblins and the sprites and spectres of the glen and the demons of the air gave answer for terror of the shout that he had uttered. And Nevin, the war goddess, attacked the host, and the four provinces of Ireland made a clamour of arms around the points of their own spears and weapons, so that 100 warriors among them fell dead of fright and terror in the middle of the encampment on that night. So, these two pieces of information coupled together with our narrative of these specters, these Geniti Glinni, these creatures from the valley, such that they are physically embodied elements, physically embodied to the point that they can harangue, tear, rend, and beat and bludgeon the heroes of Ulster. And it's only when Cuchulain contorts and twists into his spectral warp spasm shape that he is able to combat them back. But then later on, as Cuchulain bellows his hero's war shout, it drives them into a frenzy of noise and cacophony such that warriors from Ireland fell dead of terror in the midst of that dark night during the Táin Bó Cuailgne. So, the answer, not hard to say, yes, there are creatures in Irish mythology that can kill, that can scream and bellow in the darker places of our world and cause you to die of fright. So hopefully this has been interesting for you. As I said, I'm going to be doing more of these explorations of the mysteries and mythical monsters that we have in our Irish lore. Do make sure you're liking and subscribing if you want to follow along with this. If you'd like more teaching from the Irish Pagan School, go to irishpagan.school/free. Years worth of free recommendations and resources there, stuff to actually get into on it. If you want to know more about specific Morrigan content, go to the Morrigan Academy there, and we have, again, free courses you can take up to deep dive into these elements of war goddesses and battle goddesses. So from me and all of us here at the Irish Pagan School, look after yourself, and until next time, slán. Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a positive review in your podcast listener. Then head over to irishpaganschool.com and enroll in one of our free or paid courses. Slán go fóill, and we will see you next time.